Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. There is so much in the news today, but we have to begin, of course, with what's going on in Iran. The Iran war is expanding, and the Trump administration, including sinking an Iranian warship, including doing all of the things that they are saying rhetorically, they are determined to proceed. And where does that leave us? It is a war that is growing, with no end in sight. There is no leadership in Iran to take over from the Grand Ayatollah, and indeed the talk now is that the Grand Ayatollah's son may take over his role. That hardly creates a solution. The simple fact is that what Donald Trump and his administration have done is to open up a series of events and issues which we cannot address. We don't know how they're going to turn out. And what concerns me in all of this, and let me make my position clear, I am delighted the Grand Ayatollah is gone. I am delighted that the United States and Israel are standing together against radical Islam. I am delighted to see leadership come forth which says, enough is enough. When 50,000 Iranians have been gunned down by their own government, the whole world ought to be concerned. But here is the bottom line. There is no end in sight. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, have decided that they are going to pursue their role unrelentingly to bring Iran, well, I don't know where. What is the goal? To defang the government? We've done it in terms of its leadership. To continue pummeling Tehran? We're doing it now. And we are certainly targeting attacks against people who are perceived to be enemies of the West. All these things in theory are good. But in practice, we have unleashed a war, which, by the way, the administration calls a war, but which Republicans in Congress do not want to call a war. And indeed, when a vote was taken in the Senate to invoke the War Powers Act, didn't succeed. The Republicans and some Democrats agreed. And so we are left with an administration which has no restraints at all. In fact, the Speaker of the House of Representatives has said it's not a war. Well, what is it? I guess it is the right of a president of the United States to attack at will where he chooses to attack. What bothers me more than anything else is the abdication by Republicans of any attempt to restrain this president. Whether it has to do with the war in Iran, and it is a war, whether it has to do with tariffs, whether it has to do with the Epstein matter, there seems to be a reluctance on the part of Republicans to really assert themselves. So I want to forget the issues and talk only about the role of Congress. Congress, according to the Constitution, has a role. But if Congress abdicates that role, no one can force Congress to do anything. And what has happened is that the Republicans in Congress have made the decision to grant Donald Trump and his administration a blank check. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think the founders would have wanted us to do that. So what can we do? And the answer is we are completely paralyzed because Congress won't act. Now, there will be an accountability when all of this is over. Now, the United States Senate certainly hangs in the balance now between Republicans and Democrats, and it appears that the Democrats may in fact take the Senate, as they are determined to take the House. What will that mean in terms of presidential power? Well, if you believe, as Donald Trump and his administration do, in a unitary presidency, that is, the dominance of the president over everything else, very little effect. Because in order to have a balance, you have to have a Congress willing to assert its authority. I pointed out that the last time we saw a dynamic Congress willing to assert its authority was in 1975, when South Vietnam fell, and when Congress could have appropriated money which would have permitted the United States to intervene directly to save the South Vietnamese government. Congress refused to act. And as a result, Gerald R. Ford, who was President of the United States and who was a creature of Congress, he had served in the House from 1948 until his elevation to the vice presidency in 1973, he understood the need for Congress to have power. Now, what we face now is a Congress that is leaderless. And even though Speaker Johnson had the audacity to say we are not at war, it really means nothing at all. This is a moment of grave concern. The administration is determined to use military force to subdue Iran. And then what? There's a lot of talk about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah. But we know that he is not the answer. And so we have no answer about the future of Iran. And indeed, every day that we continue what we're doing, it creates a greater vacuum of decision. Now, let me make my position clear. I don't like the Islamic Republic. I didn't like the Grand Ayatollah. I am delighted that there is now an effort for a change. But the change cannot be imposed by the West. It has to come from the Iranian people themselves. Are we in a position now where Iran can do that? Evidently not. It also strikes me as very peculiar that the President of the United States is more concerned, it would seem, based on his comments, about a ballroom being built on the White House grounds than he is on resolving our problems in the Middle East. I must tell you that the ballroom idea is nuts. All you have to do is take a look at the scale model to see that it overpowers the White House itself. It is a strange administration with strange priorities. But let me point out, it is not as if there are not some restraints. The House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena to bring in Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, in order to testify because there is a real feeling that things are being covered up relative to Trump and Epstein. Pam Bondi, will she come? Won't she come? I don't know. But I can tell you again, it is extremely disturbing to see the House Oversight Committee still pursuing Epstein and the matter involving Trump with the Republicans still resisting. So this is a real conundrum. Now, I want to say a word about Gavin Newsom, who is running for president of the United States and is out promoting his book. Gavin Newsom yesterday had the audacity to claim that Israel is an apartheid state and threatened, if he were president, to change our posture in terms of supporting Israel with the arms and munitions that it needs and the diplomatic support that it needs to survive. I'm not voting for Gavin Newsom for president. Let me make it very clear. And to make the kind of statement he made in the middle of a war in the Middle East, well, at least he revealed his position. But I don't believe Gavin Newsom will be the Democratic nominee for president. I don't think Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee for president. There will have to be someone who emerges, because if, in fact, the Republicans nominate J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio as a Republican ticket for president and vice president, the Democrats must get their house in order to put up a ticket that can win. I am deeply concerned because there is no check on Donald Trump. In fact, I'm going to suggest to you the happiest man in Washington is Donald Trump. He has been able to push away all considerations dealing with his abuses of power. He has been able to get his administration in lockstep on the situation in Iran. But there is something missing in terms of the balance of power, and that is the Republicans. Now, I've said this before, but I want to indicate this again. When the elections take place in 2026 and in 2028, the Republicans will be held accountable. Will they? Only if people vote. And I believe it's very important to understand the restraints which need to be imposed on presidential power. Now, I'm an advocate for a strong presidency, not a weak presidency. But in order to have a strong presidency that functions, you have to have a Congress that functions. So my indictment today is of the Congress. Where are they? Why are they unwilling to speak out? And as for the War Powers Act, you and I have talked about that. The War Powers Act doesn't work, and certainly not when it's used in a partisan fashion. But the War Powers Act, as it passed, expands presidential war-making power. And there is no restraint which can be put on Donald Trump as he pursues his policies. Now, I listen carefully to Pete Hegseth because he is the spear carrier on this issue. And when you listen to him carefully, you understand that this war has no immediate prospect of ending. It goes on because there is no clear objective. Regime change is certainly what they have in mind. But, as has been pointed out, regime change can only happen if the people of Iran mobilize. And did you hear the president just yesterday saying, now is not the time to go into the streets? And where is the world on all of this? The United Nations should be an active force promoting some kind of justice for Iran. But there is silence emanating from the UN. There is a serious problem, my friends, in the way the world is functioning these days. And while we spend all our time devoted to this issue, let me point out to you that Ukraine continues to suffer. Vladimir Putin is thrilled that we are distracted. Vladimir Putin is thrilled that there is little the world can do about the tragedy of Ukraine. And that's my problem. My problem is there are so many balls in the air, so many issues that have to be addressed, and yet we seem reluctant to roll up our sleeves and really try to come up with solutions. This is a dangerous time. And I don't know about you, but every morning I wake up and I turn on the news to see what the latest is from the Middle East. These are just the beginnings of rumblings that are going to be with us for a long time to come. And one can only hope that in the days ahead, things go better than they are now. When Donald Trump was asked, he said, "Oh, we're doing great, better than expected." But you cannot put a rhetorical spin on a simple reality. And the reality is, we have unloosed a can of worms, and we have no idea how it's going to end up. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your comments on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Remember, tomorrow, Friday, we will do question and answers. Submit your questions, use your name and your question. Gogo's Ogre will prepare those questions, and I will attempt to answer them. Although, as you can tell from this particular podcast, the answers are extremely elusive. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, the show has been getting such positive attention that we're excited to bring on the advertising support that we now have. We expect to expand and grow, and we expect to continue to offer you the commentaries, whether it is on the war in the Middle East expanding, whether it is on Donald Trump's ballroom, whether it is on the Epstein matter and the fact that Pam Bondi has been subpoenaed, and whether it is on Gavin Newsom and his comments. Whatever it may be, we'll be here to comment, to offer observations, and of course, tomorrow to take your questions. Special appreciation to Gogo's Ogre, the wonderful producer of this podcast, and I will be back tomorrow with much more of Around the Political World with John Rothman.